Who will be Washington's next linebackers coach?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hansen. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Lars, we've got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers today. We're going to talk about, can UW basketball climb into the Big Ten tournament? That's a goal that Danny Sprinkle was talking about after their win on Saturday night over Northwestern. We're going to get to that. We're going to have a little bit of fun and just talk about who could lead UW in tackles in 2025 after losing so many of the leading tacklers from last season. But the big news of the day, or news, discussion point, whatever you want to call it, is Washington's next linebackers coach. We've got a lot of messages from our insiders, a lot of messages on Twitter saying, hey, any insight into who Washington's next linebackers coach will be? Lars, we have a lot to get to. There's one thing, you've talked to a source about this. The most popular pick from fans is former UW linebacker and Idaho defensive coordinator Cort Dennison. That's not going to be the choice.
Yeah, I can say that with 100% certainty. Cort is not going to take the job. I won't say whether he was offered or not. I'm just going to say I was told he will not take the job. He will not be joining Jedd Fisch's staff at Washington, which is unfortunate in a way because I think I can understand. Here's where I stand on the matter. Because again, for all the everydayers that are just now learning that I went to Wazoo, I don't have tinted windows, but I also don't have red tinted windows either. Like, I do not care. I understand the onus of having some type of UW ties on staff, whether it's as GAs. Here's the thing. Why was nobody clamoring for Marcus Tuiasosopo to get even like an analyst job?
Sure.
He was fired from Rice, former offensive coordinator.
Sure.
Like, those, like, if we're going to clamor for one, why not clamor for some others that actually maybe make a little more sense? Because if you look at Jedd's staff, they're missing, I think, 2 offensive analysts, not counting Luke Del Rio, who's taking a 6-month sabbatical with his dad in Paris. Well, sure.
Sounds like fun. Yeah.
Well done there by the Del Rios. But with that being said, there's something to be said, yes, for having UW presence on staff, but also it's been very clear from day one. Jedd wants to do things his own way, and that's not a bad thing per se, because on some level you do want a coach that doesn't. We saw what happened with Jimmy Lake, where he's like, hey, you know what, I'm going to be an in-house promotion, I'm going to keep all these sorts of people, and I'm going to make all these sorts of hires, and it's like, right, but it did not turn out well. And so I'm not saying it's guaranteed to turn out poorly like Jimmy did, but it's also not guaranteed to be a slam dunk. And so I think, it's not that Cort doesn't want to, I'll say this, it's not that Cort doesn't want to come back to his alma mater. I just think, similar to Robert Ballo, like that is the type of coach that I would look for in this type of search when you're thinking about replacing Ballo. It's a guy who was in contention to be a DC at a G5 school, had P4 experience at Alabama under Nick Saban, those type of things, because yeah, you can replace Taylor Mays with Vinny Sinceri with Taylor Mays and get away with that because Vinny was brand new to college coaching, and honestly, Taylor Mays had the better career. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's almost an improvement. But that means the linebackers coach, which was more impactful last season, has to be more of a home run. And so this is one where Jedd might say, hey, if I have some NFL ties, I know Rob Ryan, right? Whichever one is now at USC.
Yeah, Rob Ryan. Yeah, you're right.
One of the, by the way, that was a hilarious press conference, but I will wrap up. I want you to say that my point is, go get something. Jedd, you're more likely to go to NFL route, something like that. Also, Drew Wilkins, who I know Jedd shot down that he only talked to one coach. He's now a passing game coordinator with the Rams, so that would not be a hard job to get him out of. Also, Sean McVay, Jedd Fisch. There's a previous relationship there, so I would look more in that realm than former UW players in this regard.
So I'm glad you said Sean McVay, because one thing I wanted to take 5 seconds and mention is Scott Huff, who people wanted to come back and take the offensive line job, tight ends coach with the Rams now. I say that to say Scott Huff getting that job, going back to a position he hasn't coached since I believe 2013, is something of note, because I think that somebody who I mentioned on the show the other day, the last time we had this discussion, is Grant O'Brien, who is the safeties coach at Purdue under Ryan Walters, is the name that I'm going to keep emphasizing and keep saying you should keep an eye on because he's got a really nice track record as a recruiter, a really nice long relationship with Ryan Walters. And if it's somebody who you want to bring in terms of, like Steve Belichick and Vinny Sunseri had their relationship, or somebody who this guy is completely new to the staff, but he has somebody else right there who's got enough of a relationship with that they can kind of bounce ideas off each other as they get integrated with everybody else. And as everyone, starts to gel and get on the same page, that's the kind of hire that I think would just make a lot of sense in that regard. And O'Brien has proven to be a really good coach at safe, just a really good safeties coach and a really good recruiter as well. So that's somebody that I would keep an eye on, because Lars, let's be real, outside of that, there aren't a lot of, just like with Robert Balla, there weren't a lot of names out there where it's, this guy's coming in for an interview, that guy's coming in for an interview. So you just kind of have to look at what's in front of you. And if, somebody comes out of left field like Balla did, I wouldn't be surprised. But when we look at O'Brien, that's just the name that I'd want to go with, because it's not going to be Cort.
No, but I think the intriguing, I don't discredit Grant O'Brien as a potential candidate. I would just think here's my question, I guess, that I would both pose to you in answering that question. Who's making this hire? Is it Jedd or is it Ryan? Because if it's Ryan, sure, I would probably lean more O'Brien, but I would also have expected that hire to be done by now. Granted, I know Balla left kind of surprisingly, but I get, you mentioned on the show previously, like those two have that connection. That seems like a simple. Jedd looks at Ryan and says, "Hey, who do you want to hire? I got my guy right here. Like this is the guy. We can just make this really simple." And you look at Grant O'Brien's track record; it's not like, it's not like he's a wonder kid, but he's also not like he's a green in the pastures where he's just a brand new coach. He's got experience. He's got ties to Ryan beyond what they did at Purdue. And so you think about that, like, okay, that's an appealing candidate, but maybe Jedd would push back and say, well, what if we can go get a Balla? What if we can go get, again, this is no sourcing on this, is just throwing out a name, but as an example, a William Inge type, a SEC coach who maybe previously weren't coached at UW or had some ties there, somebody like that, where they're a current P4, sure, linebacker coach, and say, hey, you know what, we'll give you, an extra $250K and a co-DC title. Like, and that will also be my intriguing side note here. Will there be a code coordinator title? Because if it is, that is a problem. I almost think you almost can't just to save face, but some guys might say, hey, well, in order to take that job, if I'm a linebackers coach and I'm heavily involved here, I need kind of a promotion. Why would I take a lateral job to go all the way up to Seattle? I know UW fans don't want to hear this, but having talked to coaches for over a decade covering the sport, Seattle is a very appealing market, as Ryan Walters described. It's a major media market, those sorts of things. And it's also somewhat still of a college town where you're away from the city. You're not in the heart of Los Angeles and those sorts of things. But it is also insanely far away from most of the country. Like when I went out to Big Ten Media Day, that felt like an entire 2-year trip. Like going out to Penn State felt like going to Europe almost. But beautiful drive through the state of Pennsylvania, I will say that. But just, it's harder, on that trip back, it's like, man, this is a 5-hour flight, and you're kind of gaining time, but you don't feel like you are. And so there's so many things that it almost kind of you'll probably like this because you don't care about them. The Mariners, in a way, because you're a Red Sox fan, that's why I say you don't care about them. But the Mariners have to overpay for guys like Robinson Cano. You have to overpay for premium talent, almost the way like UW, where we talk about in transfer. You might have to throw an extra 50 or 100 just to get a guy up to Seattle because it's a lot further away from their home than, say, Mississippi or Florida or X, Y, and Z.
So I do like where you're going with that. And it's going to be something that's really interesting to watch over, because it shouldn't take very long. I have a feeling that, maybe – because one thing that we should also address is Jedd Fisch's graphic where he was saying good luck to Vic Fangio, Harry Roseman, those sorts of guys, where I wouldn't be surprised if he's waiting for the Super Bowl to be over, just, talk about left field for 30 seconds here. If he's going to call his old college roommate, Harry Roseman, and say, hey man, there anybody you might think of on your staff or around the world of football that you're aware of that might be interested in taking this job? And not as, a sign of desperation, as that's what he did with Bill Belichick to get Robert Balla the job. So it's just, there are a lot of interesting alleys to consider when it comes to a linebackers coach here, because Jedd has proven that coaches will come in, take a job on his staff for a year, and, for better or for worse, they're going to go elsewhere and get a promotion. But the co-DC title, last thing I want to make sure we mention there is, it would certainly be a little frustrating if somebody did get a co-DC title, because it felt like, we got a lot of questions about it, where why isn't Balla getting that? Feels like he's earned it. And we certainly agree, but yeah, that's going to be something to monitor as well. But Lars, we're going to stay on linebackers, maybe get a little bit into safeties because we're going to have some fun and predict UW's leading tackler in 2025. Right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel, and the game tips off. The NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, Lars, Washington, I think the number, after some of the transfers and everything, was 10 of the 12 leading tacklers on this UW defense are not going to be back next season, whether it be graduation, transfer portal, anything like that. It's going to look very different. There are only 4 starters coming back, and Zach Durfee was hurt for part of the season. There's going to be a whole lot of things that look different along Washington's defense. But you and I really like the pieces that they brought in at linebacker, at safety, along the defensive line. We don't, there's nobody on this defensive line who's probably going to rack up 80, 90 tackles as much as we would enjoy that. But when you look at this is going to be fun, a lot like our bold prediction segment, as the everydayers know. If you had to guess right now, as we record this on Sunday, February 9th, who will be Washington's leading tackler in 2025 and why?
I'm torn between 2, and I'm going to take the one you're most high on, and that's Alex McLaughlin, for the simple reason of the production and the position. I knew that was going to piss you off because I respect it. I gave you Rome the other day, so I'm taking the one that you wanted today. But with that being said, not out of spite, just because I wanted to see the reaction, honestly. But the reason why is because of the production he had in Northern Arizona, where you can see that's exactly what – call it John Richardson because he's now the secondary coach, as I have reported multiple times on Locked On Huskies. Shout out. But with that being said, that's the reason why I say that is because the emphasis of Taylor Mays is going to be just helping coach the safeties and another NFL guy that, you can say, hey, I know, let me help you with your game approach, these sorts of things. It's really John Richardson's approach to the secondary paired with Ryan Walters. And I think that's what Richardson was looking for at the safety. The reason why I'm building it up the way, the reason UW is going to structure this defense with 5 defensive backs, Alex McLaughlin is probably going to be involved in every single play, some way, shape, or form, whether he's coming up, making a play over the middle, breaking left or right, whichever one it happens to be. It just screams a guy that, for one reason or another, is going to be around the ball too much to not lead the team in tackles.
So you're absolutely right for every single reason that you just mentioned. There's one, and I think the biggest reason, which is why I wanted to pick him first, is Dylan Tiedemann, who spent 2 years under Ryan Walters at Purdue, All-American, super duper productive over his time there. If you had to guess, because he was a true sophomore when he left and transferred to Oregon, which we won't talk about, but if you had to guess how many tackles he had over a 2-year period off the top of your head, what would you say that number is?
98?
No, he had 210 tackles over his 2 seasons combined. 106 as a freshman, 104 last season. Super productive, always around the ball, and that's the kind of player that Alex McLaughlin is. I know I've said it before on this show, and I'm going to double down on it, is if Alex McLaughlin is more productive than Dylan Tiedemann this season, I wouldn't be surprised. Just because of the way he can be used by Ryan Walters, by this defense, because he's shown before that he can have a lot of success with a safety like that is super productive and flies around and can line up all over the formation and just get to the football. So I really like that. But I'm going to hand that one to you. So I'm going to go a different route here. And I was really torn because I thought the guy we were going to go with was Buda Alukta, but I'm going to take Xe'ree Alexander here. And the reason I'm going to do that, so we just kind of flip-flop in terms of our guys. The reason I want to take Xe'ree here is one thing about Buda is his PFF missed tackle rating is a little bit higher. So I want to go with the guy that's been a little bit more secure in that. And I think that's something that, no matter who Washington's linebackers coach is, this is why we tied these first 2 segments together. See, it's the producing on the back end. We have fun with this. Yeah. High IQ ball play there. Where I look at all this and I say, Xe'ree Alexander is, before Robert Barlow left, he talked about the size, the physicality, the thump that he brings when he's coming downhill. And he's somebody who in the middle of the defense where no matter what this group is going to look like, he's somebody that's going to be involved in a lot of plays. And I think that's really critical when we talk about this, because it's not just about the solo tackles. It's just about being involved, which is something that he can do very, very frequently. We saw Carson Bruner do that. We've seen Edefani Lefosio do that. We saw Ben Burkervin do that really, really well back in the day. Shout out. So there are a lot of different reasons why you could go with him there. And I just think that's the kind of guy who just is a really high IQ player and will always find a way to be in a solid position to help out and not do what happened last year, which is let guys get away and get into the second level.
So I'm glad you mentioned Buddha and actually in the same light, because the reason I would have taken Buddha was just for the simple troll job of knowing it would piss Wazoo fans off if Wazoo's misleading tackler last season ended up leading UW in tackles. Like, it just seems poetic on so many levels. But also, it made me think of another former player that I ripped from leading the Pac-12 in tackles, and that was Kayvon Thibodeau. So with that being said, I think either way, when you look at it's going to be obviously somebody in the back, call it 7. Right. You can call it 7 or 6, 7, whichever one you want to call it, where I think that's going to ultimately end up determining that situation in terms of who do you play with too often or do you play with one, and that kind of limits the production one of those two guys have, whereas Alex McLaughlin is going to be on the field every single play. Or most, again, I guess bold prediction here, but he will lead UW in snaps. He seems like that type of guy where I don't think CJ Christian will be that far behind either, but he's more of a honey badger, might push Dyson McCutcheon for time at nickel. There's a couple other options there. I'm not saying it's guaranteed. I'm just saying.
No, I like it. I went a different way. So
has that type of ability. I would put him as like a dark horse top 5 candidate. I'm not saying he's going to lead, but I think I would not be surprised if we're looking up and you have 2 safeties in the top 5 in tackles on this defense.
So sorry, no, I didn't want to cut you off there because I just thought about this completely differently. So when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, because I still think that it'll be Rashawn Clark, Dyson McCutcheon, or Alex McLaughlin in that nickel spot more often than not. But the guy who I didn't want to leave out of this conversation, and unfortunately, with the way my mind works, it accidentally being CJ Christian, was Makell Esteen. Where the reason I say that is go back and watch that game that he had against Indiana, where when we watch Makell, we've seen him as somebody, 2023, 2022, who was around the ball, making plays, just as a true safety, getting interceptions and everything like that. But he had 12 tackles in that game. And he showed off that he can be really physical and he can come downhill and he can really help out and run support. So another year with the way that Tyler Owens and this strength staff want to make sure these guys are developed, adding 5-10 pounds, whatever you want to call it, onto his frame and continuing to help him play a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, much like we just talked about with Alex McLaughlin and what he can do in this Ryan Walters scheme. You could say all those same things about Makell Esteen if you want. If Walters feels a little bit more comfortable with him in that role, we've seen that. It's because we've seen it with these other guys on film, whether it be Christian, Xe'ree Alexander, McLaughlin, Buddha, but just not in purple and gold. We've seen that with Makell Esteen. So I think that's just something that I think we should keep in mind as we continue to have this discussion.
Yeah, Makell is a real interesting candidate. Just I say that with all respect because you look at his Lawndale High School teammate, Elijah Jackson, went to TCU. Makell stayed, and now stayed through 2 coaching changes. So just in the past, in terms of coordinators, going from you had Belichick, now you have Ryan Walters, and we'll see what happens. I'm really curious to see what happens in the spring because Makell has been an interesting character to where when he has the 2 interceptions, I think it was William Inch who said I think he wins the lottery just as 2 plays, and it's it ended up but that's not a slight, but it made me think about your tackle point and the ironic part about we love narratives on the show, but context doesn't always matter with narratives because that Indiana game, the secondary and defense got torched. And so
100%.
And this is no slight on Makell, but just when you look at total tackles, how much of that is, he was the last man there, or, are you playing back or are you playing up? Hey, we had 10 tackles, but he was an enforcer. Or is he making 10 plus tackles because, only sole playing defense in the back 5?
So I'm so glad you said that because the first thing that came to mind wasn't, Indiana doing a really great job being physical, establishing the run, getting downhill. It was that goal line stand that they had right before the half where he had 3 or 4 tackles in that span of those, last 6, 7, 8 plays of the drive where he was being physical. He was an enforcer coming up and just finishing plays and cleaning them up that's what stands out to me. And where I look at it and I said, okay, yeah, I'm very curious to see what this guy's role is going to look like moving forward, because we didn't really see very much of that for the rest of the season. And I don't think that's any slight to him. I think that was just, the health of the position, different things like that. So when I watch Makell Esteen, I think he's going to be utilized in a lot of different ways this season. I think he might still end up being the primary guy, over the top in cover 1, cover 3, whatever it is you want to call it. And he can still play a whole lot of zone. But if you ask him to do that, I think he could do it at a high level. The question is, how much is he actually going to be asked to do it? But Lars, we're going to shift the conversation to basketball a little bit, because they got a solid win over Northwestern. So Lars, Washington still sitting toward the bottom of the Big Ten after that win over Northwestern. But I look at this and I listen to what Danny Sprinkle said to us in the media on Saturday night after the game. And he was like, yeah, these seniors understand it's their last 5-6 weeks of college basketball. And, we have an opportunity here to kind of pick it up. And it's a great stat by Max Vrooman on Twitter. Does great stuff with the UW basketball team. So the record that UW has against KenPom teams that are ranked outside the top 40 this season is 11-2. There, I believe, said 5 opponents coming up are not ranked in the top 40. So there's, sometimes that's the way basketball works, as he said. And they have an opportunity here to climb out of the cellar, to get into the top 15, because that's what you need to make the Big Ten tournament. And they showed on Saturday that the pieces are there. They lost another big lead, but were able to find a way to win the game. And, it's not a lot, but if you can do that, this team has the pieces.
Makes me wonder how much of that Minnesota game is going to come back to haunt them, because that Minnesota is another team in that category where, you're talking about the sub 40s, I think, where if you can win that one and then I'm not saying
they did win that game.
Or not Minnesota. Which one was the thing that they lost? There's one that they lost. Nebraska. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. Not Nebraska. Where it's like, if you can hold on in that game, because that game almost epitomized the season, where you at one point had a 13-point lead, 10-point at halftime, and you lose by double digits. And I think at that point it's like, okay, well, all the pieces are there for this, why we were so optimistic about this team, but consistency is the key. And so now the fact, like you said, they beat Minnesota. Now you beat a lesser team in Northwestern. The schedule favors you on the way out, but we haven't necessarily seen this team finish the games against team that they should be. They have most of the time,
yeah.
But there's, that one loss where it's like, oh my God, if we're talking, it's going to come down to those 1 or 2 losses in terms of them getting in or them not getting into the Big Ten tournament. And I really think, like, the ironic part is now you're going to deal with one less senior guard, which I'm not saying Luis Corbett had a ton of impact on the team, but just, it's Danny sending a message saying, hey, look, no matter what situation we're in, like, all hands are on deck. Yeah, but you got to be able to get with the program in order to be on deck. Like, that's how this is working. And so if they don't end up making it, I still like the foundation that Danny laid in his first season, but you would hope that, what does Great want to finish his college career as? He went from being a, player of the year at Utah State in the Mountain West to kind of an afterthought in the Big Ten. I mean, stats are nice, but like, it hasn't been the season certainly that anybody thought.
Right, but I think a big part of that is something that you and I discussed about this team in the preseason. I know I wrote about it over on Huskies Wire as well, and that's the Franck Kepnang effect, where when there's only one big, really, when Wilhelm's not on the floor, it's a lot harder for Great to be able to do what he wants to do, because he's talked about that. Danny's talked about that. When they're able to double and triple team him in the paint and they're not knocking down shots, where, we saw the 3-pointers fall at a really high clip early on against Nebraska, and then that just went cold and they came back down to earth. Big reason they lost that game was not being able to shoot the ball in the second half. But I look at all that and I say that's a big reason where, like, there are certainly things where, Great's had some careless turnovers. There have been some games early on where he didn't look like, everything he was touted to be. But as the season has gone along, he has certainly done a really good job of getting stronger, becoming more consistent, and just contributing, especially over these last couple of games with Franck Kepnang on the floor. It's been more helpful for him. And another big reason for that is guys have started to develop around him. And that was something else we didn't see early on in the season, where there were flashes from Tyler Harris. Now that guy is starting to show some signs of consistency, where he's somebody I've been really, really impressed with over the last 3, 4, 5 games, where he's found it. And Danny Sprinkle said as much, where he's told us, hey, it's starting to click for him. He's really starting to get it going at both ends of the floor. And you need those third options where, when DJ Davis, he's not going to explode like he did against Illinois for 31 points. But if he can knock down a couple threes like he did last night against Northwestern, like he can do in spurts, that's helpful. Danny talked about benching Zoom Diallo for the 5 turnovers that he had when you're not turning the ball over at that high of a clip. And you have guys who can knock down open shots. Makai Mason, when he's on, is another guy where it's just been so up and down. And, shout out to Great Osobor for coming in and asking Tyler Harris and DJ Davis after the game what fans should expect from them going forward. That was the number one thing they said was consistency. It was, we need to find a way to be more consistent over the last month of the season because we have not seen that. And that's been the biggest reason why this team has not found success.
Yeah, and absolutely, Frank. Even just playing 11 minutes last night or Saturday night. So you're not asking 25-30. You're just almost kind of like the points thing that you're mentioning. You just need kind of a baker's dozen. Baker's dozen from DJ Davis. A baker's dozen from Zoom Diallo. If Great is able to get, let's say, 18 and 8, a night per game, that's perfect. Because you don't really need a ton. You just need, and that's kind of the design of this team. It's everybody's got a role. But the problem is when 2 or 3 guys aren't playing their role, and you're only getting, let's say, 5 points from DJ Davis and Makai Mason, or Zoom's having a struggling night offensively with the turnovers, or that's those sorts of things. Then Great isn't able to do what he's able to do because he's being doubled because they don't have to worry about the shooting, and you're chasing the game instead of defending a lead. But that's also the other thing is it's been on kind of both sides of the ball at different times. Where it's, hey, now we got a 10-point lead or a 12-point lead or whatever it is, and then the defense just evaporates. Now again, it is college basketball. I think one thing we've seen this year is teams are never out of it. You're never true. Even UW, we've seen them be down big deficits and end up chipping away right till the end. And then, you still end up coming up with a loss. But at least you feel better about yourself versus earlier in the season when you're losing, wow, we lost by double digits. And it's okay. At least you're fighting and making it. It's been a frustrating season in that realm. I almost feel like the frustration this season with all the young guys that are playing will be, carried into next season. It's like, hey, we're not going to have this issue next season because we lived through almost in a way to pair this whole thing together with the football program. It's a foundational year. Danny has expressed that as much where, hey, it's not easy to just come in and run my system. And it's not a hard system, but it asks a lot. Right. It's very physical. It's very demanding. And you add to it playing in the Big Ten, the road, and all those sorts of things. Yeah, we set the expectations high for football like we did with basketball. We thought this was a tournament team. It still very much could be a tournament team, but they have to show how bad they wanted the season now that all the pieces are on the table with Frank back, Wilhelm's being serviceable. You're not going to get Chris Conway back, and Dominique Diomande is what he is, but you're not really expecting either of those 2 guys to make an impact. Frank, you were. That's all you need is just 10 to 15 minutes a night for Frank, 5 to 7 rebounds, 3 to 5 points. You're not asking for a ton. You just need that other body so Great can do great things. Everybody else can do great around him.
So one of the things I want to hit on there is something I know we've both gotten a lot of questions about is Dominique Diomande. And it's, hey, why haven't we seen him yet? Where that's one of those things where they want to make sure he's integrated in the system. And Danny has spoken on that a couple of different times. And, you were certainly hoping he was going to be a boost once he arrived, but as you said, Lars, Danny has a really complicated system to run. And he said it's unfair to set expectations around guys and just throw them out there immediately and just see what happens. I want to make sure he's comfortable, he's ready, and he's going to work well with what we have. And so that's one of the reasons we haven't seen that guy yet. And if he does, play a couple games down the stretch, that would be a nice boost if, assuming that he's going to be ready to contribute, because that adds a whole lot on both ends of the floor. Oh, yeah, please.
But there is something to be said, and I know people are going to hate hearing this, but there is something about building the next season when you're talking about you have Zoom and Jace coming back and some young guys, but nobody's seen Dominique Diomande in Danny's system. There is a benefit if Danny doesn't have any tape on Dominic in his system. Sure. I know it's because, again, the only reason I'm throwing that out there is at this point with 5 to 6 games up, what do you gain from playing Dominique Diomande? I'm speaking to Husky fans, not you, because it's no, I know you're a Husky fan, but I'm relaying this message to Husky fans because it's as much as you might think, hey, Dominic, why'd you go get him if you're not going to play him? Danny's not just thinking about one and done here. He's thinking, hey, I got 3. I'm going to keep mentioning this because we keep getting questions about it. Go back and listen to our interview with Danny Sprinkle from, what was it, May or June?
June, July, yeah.
June, July, sometime over the summer, where I brought up the point that Danny made to me, which is, hey, this is going to take 2 or 3 years to build. But by the way, in year 3, we are going to be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, not, hey, 1, 2, 3, now I'm out of here. It's, hey, if I want to build a winner at Washington with Nico Bondetto, JJ Mandequit, Cortland Muldrew, Matty Troy, all these guys coming in, none of them have tape in Danny's system. Why ruin one guy's potential as a starting 3 next year for 2 or 3 games this season?
So let's dive into that before we get out of here, because that is a big thing where making the Big Ten tournament would be a great step in the right direction. Where let's look at some of the guys that do have eligibility coming back. Let's start with Franck Kepnang, because Danny has said they're looking into a medical red shirt. They'd like to get him back. And if he's healthy, that's a great piece to have. We know that because we see the impact on both ends of the floor when he's out there. It's a huge question mark if he can stay healthy. But if he does, we know what that looks like. On top of that, you've got a whole bunch of scoring back with the way Tyler Harris is developing. He's got 2 more years of eligibility. Makai Mason's got another year. Zoom, Jace, as you said, Christian King, who's somebody who's been productive in spurts, where you have that and you combine that with the number 1 recruiting class in the Big Ten, which has a true point guard in JJ Mandequit. That's going to be really, really helpful in terms of installing the offense, running it the way that Danny wants to, with Nico Mandalo, with Cortland Muldrew, and then the number 2 junior college player in the country who has some Big Ten experience and is exactly what you look for in terms of a guy that can play offense in this conference at the 5 in Matty Troy. So you look at that, you add a couple of pieces to the transfer portal, and it's exactly what you're talking about, Lars. All of a sudden it is, that jump forward that you're looking for, where, yeah, we expected it to be off to a stronger start than it has been. And for, as we just laid out, a variety of reasons, it hasn't been so far, but there's still an opportunity to give yourself a better foundational, just year 1, where you go to Ohio State on Wednesday, you win. You go to Penn State on Saturday, you win again. And all of a sudden you're looking a little bit better. You're starting to climb the ranks in the Big Ten a little bit. And if you can just find a way to make your way into the Big Ten tournament, I'm not going to make any predictions because who knows what's going to happen. That's the beauty of March Madness, the beauty of college basketball. But all of a sudden, a few things start clicking, you start getting hot at the right time, you can make a little bit of noise. And that's just one of the things that Danny and this program need to continue to sell on the recruiting trail and to continue to grow and develop. And because I'll be completely honest, watching just the way Hec Ed has been over the last month or two, honestly for the entire season, but really over the last month or two, has not been, as me, somebody who grew up in LA, what it was like watching it on TV in the Brandon Roy years, in the Isaiah Thomas years, where it was like Hec Ed can be one of the most fun places to watch a college basketball game in the country. And I think Danny's doing a really good job of setting a foundation and building what could be a true competitor in the Big Ten and just in the country. But we know where it can be, and you can just tell it's not there yet.
It's not. And I would also say, similar to kind of everything about next season, don't forget Chris Conway. Chris Conway is also, I think, somewhat in play for this as well as a 4 or 5. But my point in this, yeah, you're 100% right, where you look at it and think, but for the fans, I think, what are you going to come out to see this season? Zoom go pretty good, great, underwhelmed. I understand why Husky fans haven't come out, but that's why it's so imperative the next season is the fact that you have the number 1 ranked recruiting class in the Big Ten. There's something to come out for next season. So I would tell Husky fans, look, if you sat at home and this sat out this season and said, you know what, I'm going to wait and see what Danny does, it's kind of underwhelming. Come out next season. Next season, not that these guys weren't worth it, but barring a major catastrophe, next season and that loaded young talent will be a lot of fun to watch.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell, so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us 5-star reviews. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.